She was the epitome of what people mean when they refer to someone as a classic beauty. Blonde and blue-eyed, with full lips and a true peaches and cream complexion. She had worked as a model since she was 14. More than that, the 29-year-old Cape Town native was known by those close to her for her sly sense of humor, love for animals, and the intelligence that had seen her through law school and a burgeoning career as both a television personality and an activist for women's issues, including domestic violence. She was also dead. Shot 4 times by her internationally known Paralympian sprinter boyfriend, her story had since been too often overshadowed by his. Today would be no different, but at least it could offer her friends and family a turning point in their grief. At least there would at last be some sense of justice. Today is Friday, September 12, 2025, and on this day in 2014, darling of the London Paralympic Games turned murderer Oscar Pistorius was found guilty of causing the death of Reeva Steenkamp 19 months before. I'm your host, Running Up That Hillary, and you are listening to Today in Running History. It is Fueled Friday, which means that today's episode is sponsored by Fuel Goods, the awesome sports nutrition marketplace and the company behind the Runner Box subscription that I absolutely love. So here's how it works. Every 2 months, I receive a box that contains everything from pre-run snacks and mid-run fuel to post-run recovery shakes and hydration mixes, plus some non-edible items too, like anti-chafe, muscle rub, deodorant, and the like. It is such a fantastic way to discover new brands and products I otherwise may have never known were out there at all. And then here's where it gets even cooler. As a subscriber, I automatically get a discount on anything I purchase through the marketplace, plus a bigger discount if I set up my favorite products as a recurring subscription. I have been a subscriber for about 3 years now, so this next part doesn't apply to me, but new subscribers also get $10 to spend on anything at all within the marketplace. And then finally, you can also get $10 off the first box of your subscription by using my code Hillary10 at checkout. So head over to the Fuel Goods website in the episode description and check out the Runner Box subscription. Happy Fueled Friday. Okay, it felt kind of weird doing an ad read before we get into this topic because it is by far the heaviest I have covered on the podcast so far. But anyways, let's go ahead and talk about Oscar Pistorius and Reeva Steenkamp. Had things turned out much, much differently, the photos snapped of Oscar Pistorius and Reeva Steenkamp at the 2012 South African Sports Awards would have been an amazing keepsake. Something they could have shown their kids someday, accompanied by a cute story of the night that mommy met daddy. She was his last-minute +1 for an event which he had RSVP'd to and forgotten about until after the couple's blind lunch date earlier that day, and he was relieved and surprised that she could be so spontaneous. She in a short French dress and casual ponytail, and he in a trim black suit. The couple looked good together, giving no indication in the pictures that they had only met hours before. Over the next week, they saw each other every day. When her Christmas plans fell through, they spent the holiday together. It was Reeva's 6th year in Johannesburg, where she had moved to pursue a modeling career following her recovery from a serious horseback riding accident. Since her selection as the first face of Avon Cosmetics in South Africa, Reeva's star had steadily been on the rise. She had completed filming as a celebrity contestant on the show Tropica Island of Treasure and was looking forward to seeing its debut in February. She was killed 2 days before the first episode was broadcast. To understand the magnitude of Pistorius's fall from grace, we must return to the summer of 2012, only months before he met Reeva, and when the lead-up to the London Olympics was at its peak. There was no shortage of GOAT-level athletes for the media to cover, from Usain Bolt and Allison Felix to the members of both the USA men's basketball and women's gymnastics team. But every Olympics has its breakout star, and what could be more appealing than a double amputee whose journey from Paralympian to the greatest sports stage in the world came with no small bit of both inspiration and controversy. Oscar Pistorius was born in Johannesburg in November 1986, the middle of three children. He was born without fibula, which are the thinner bones that run alongside the tibia, and deformed feet. It is the most common form of long bone birth deficiency in the lower leg, occurring in 1 out of every 40,000 to 50,000 births. When he was 7 months old, his legs were amputated about halfway between his knees and ankles, and he received his first prosthetics about 6 months later. Though his family was financially comfortable, Pistorius's lifestyle changed dramatically with his parents' divorce when he was 6 years old. His mother struggled to provide financially for Oscar and his siblings and was terrified when she had to move them to a rougher neighborhood where they experienced several break-ins. She took to sleeping with a gun under a pillow. Sources say that while his mother's heightened fear of crime definitely rubbed off on her middle child, the presence of guns in the house was nothing new. His father was a gun enthusiast, considering it a vital part of his heritage as a white Afrikaner. The elder Pistorius owned 55 firearms and taught Oscar how to shoot early on. Oscar Pistorius's passion, though, was sports. He was raised to be as active as any other child and excelled early in a wide variety of sports, including wrestling, boxing, water polo, cricket, and tennis. He developed into an adrenaline junkie, careening down the hills near his home on go-karts and motorbikes with his brother and friends. He was never shy or reserved, and by all accounts tended to lash out when he was upset, usually verbally, but increasingly physically as well as he grew into adolescence. Neither of his parents believed in coddling him, and for better or for worse, taught him from a young age not to let himself get pushed around. If you're keeping track, so far, we've got two pivotal factors that shaped the life of Oscar Pistorius. First was the birth defect and his family's subsequent commitment to not letting it slow him down, which seemed to cause in him an almost reckless defiance when it came to developing his own physicality. Then there was his parents' divorce and his move with his mom and siblings to a rough neighborhood. When Pistorius was 15, he experienced his life's third defining moment, the sudden death of his beloved mother at age 43 after a medical misdiagnosis and adverse reaction to her medication. His anxiety increased after her death, which he understandably described as a crushing loss. He threw himself even more into sports to help deal with the void left by her absence. 15 months later, Pistorius shattered his knee while playing rugby, and it was while rehabbing this injury that doctors recommended to the 17-year-old that he incorporate running into his physical therapy routine. At first, he gravitated to longer distances like 10Ks, but soon he discovered sprinting, which coincided with the development of the lighter prosthetics that were changing the landscape of competitive sports for athletes like Pistorius. Only 3 weeks after taking up sprinting, Oscar Pistorius ran and decisively won his first 100-meter race in 11.72 seconds at a high school meet, besting the Paralympic record of 12.20 seconds. This was the end of January 2004, 5 months before he was invited to the U.S. to try out the flex foot cheetah blades for the first time, and almost 8 months before he won his first Paralympic gold medal in the 200 meters in another world record time. 2 months after his first Paralympics, Pistorius turned 18. The international governing body for track and field struggled to determine whether Pistorius's prosthetics, which had earned him the nickname Blade Runner, gave him an unfair advantage on the track. The IAAF initially banned him from competing against able-bodied competitors in 2008, citing that the spring-like effect of his carbon fiber blades enhanced his performance rather than evened the playing field. This was overruled after a study by Rice University found that while Pistorius's mechanics were different from that of able-bodied competitors, his overall physiology was not. The controversy didn't end with the lifting of the ban, but it did set the stage for Pistorius to become the first ever double amputee to compete in an able-bodied Olympic Games. Entering those games, Pistorius had won 4 gold and 1 bronze medal across 2 Paralympic Games, and he would go on to win 2 golds and a silver in the 2012 Paralympics that followed. Television audiences couldn't get enough of the inspirational story of the boy who overcame the amputation of his legs and the death of his mother to become the so-called fastest man on no legs. He advanced to the semifinals in the 400 meters, but did not make it to the finals. In the 4x4, Pistorius anchored a South African team that finished in 8th place. While he won no medals, that didn't dampen fans' enthusiasm for what they regarded as Pistorius' determination and incredible competitive spirit. What most of those fans hadn't seen was Pistorius storming out of a BBC radio interview the year before when he was asked about the ongoing controversy regarding his cheetah blades, or the angry outbursts he had while on the phone in Olympic Village, which were so loud that some journalists had to change rooms, or the time a month before Steenkamp's shooting when he accidentally discharged a gun in the middle of a crowded restaurant, or the mounting incidents of recklessness and arrogance and hot temper that those close to him would later say had them worried. For its part, the South African media had been reluctant to publish anything that might tarnish the image of a national hero. And really, most of what was going on wasn't newsworthy so much as concerning for the people who were seeing a new and disturbing side of a man they had always known as intense but not unstable. Also in 2012, Pistorius was reportedly becoming more involved in gun collecting and had joined a club of firearm enthusiasts. While South Africa has what are considered to be strict laws regarding gun ownership, certified collectors may own a more extensive number and type of weapons than those who buy them for self-defense. Regardless, it took only one gun to kill Reeva, a 9mm pistol he was issued a license for on September 10, 2012, just less than 2 months before the day he met her. The Oscar Pistorius who met Reeva Steenkamp that night in November 2012 must have been hard to resist, with his confidence and status as one of South Africa's most beloved citizens. But while the couple grew close quickly, evidence presented at his trial indicates that she was already worn down by his quick temper and need and constant jealousy. For his part, Pistorius would claim that he was besotted with Steenkamp, and the two were planning a life together. Regardless of how besotted they were with each other, that future together would never happen, decimated by 4 hollow point bullets in the wee hours of Valentine's Day, 2013. In his account of the shooting, Pistorius says the couple went to bed shortly after 10, and that they both woke up hours later because of the heat and humidity. When he went out to the balcony to retrieve a fan, he heard a noise that sounded like a window opening and immediately feared that there was an intruder in the house. He grabbed his gun, which was already loaded, from under the bed. He yelled to Reeva to call the police and then ran to the closed and locked inner door of the bathroom where the toilet was located, through which he fired 4 shots. It was only after he couldn't find Reeva that he broke down the door with a cricket bat and found her lifeless body inside. Pistorius was taken into custody and charged the next day with the murder. He was released until his trial, which would begin the following March. The key to prosecutors' case against Pistorius was the heated argument between the couple, followed by a woman's screams, which neighbors reported hearing just before the 3:14 a.m. incident. Prosecutors were unconvinced by his recounting of the event. Why, they challenged, would an intruder lock himself into the water closet, of all places, where he would be trapped? There was also an issue regarding whether or not Pistorius had taken the time to put on his prosthetics before confronting what he said was an intruder. He said he had not, but prosecutors said he had. In South Africa, jury trials were abolished in 1969 to combat possible prejudice in the era of apartheid. So Pistorius' case was decided by a judge and 2 legal experts, called assessors, all of whom had an equal say in the verdict. Oscar Pistorius was found guilty of culpable homicide, which is the equivalent to manslaughter in the US, as well as reckless endangerment for a separate gun-related incident. He was later sentenced to a maximum of 5 years and was in prison for less than a year before being released on parole. However, the South African justice system allows for an appeal by the state, which is what happened next. The result was that Pistorius' conviction for culpable homicide was overturned, and he was convicted of murder instead. When all was said and done, Pistorius was sentenced to 15 years and served 9. He was released from prison on January 5th, 2025, and ordered to live under certain parole restrictions until 2029, including geographic limitations, mandatory community service, and participation in anger management and domestic violence programs. He was seen participating in a triathlon since his release, but is legally prevented from talking to the media. In contrast, Reeva's family has said that they are serving a life sentence and believe that Pistorius is neither rehabilitated or remorseful. They launched a foundation in their daughter's name in 2015 and were active in its efforts to combat domestic violence and abuse. Unfortunately, it is not possible to end this episode on a very positive note. Reeva's father died almost 2 years ago, and her mom, June, suffered a stroke earlier this month. The Steenkamp family has reached out through the media and online in hopes of raising funds to aid her recovery. That is all for today's show. Thank you so much for listening. Please join me tomorrow for another special Podception episode, this time featuring Alex Granata of the Ali G's Show. I'm your host, Running Up That Hillary, and this has been Today in Running History.